Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan McNeil, and this is the Builder by Day podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. In this episode, we are going to discuss some of the most common mistakes that are made during the building process and how they can affect the outcome and success of the project. Everyone knows someone with a construction horror story. The builder ghosted us. The job took 6 extra months. We were way over budget. We had to fire the contractor halfway through. It happens more than it should. And here's the thing. It usually does not come down to bad luck. It comes down to bad planning, bad communication, and bad relationships. In this episode, we are going to break down why people get burned in construction and how most of it could be avoided. Number one on the top of the list is misaligned expectations. This is a big one. It is where most of the problems start. The client thinks they are getting one thing, the builder thinks they are building something else, and both sides are convinced that they are right. Now, why is this the case? Normally it's because the quote was vague, the scope was assumed, and the details were never actually nailed down. People say yes to a price without fully understanding what it includes. Then halfway through, they realize things they thought were part of the deal are actually not. Suddenly, everything is a fight. The builder feels like they are doing more than they signed up for, and the client feels like they are being nickeled and dimed. It all comes down to clarity. If it is not spelled out in writing, it will come back to haunt everyone. Number 2 on the list is builders who say yes too easily. This one is also very common. A lot of builders just want the job. They want the sale, so they'll say yes to everything. Can you build it for that price? Yes. Can you start in 2 weeks? Yes. Can we make changes as we go? Sure. The problem is they're not being honest, not with the clients, and sometimes not even with themselves. They figure they will sort it out later, or that they will deal with the fallout when it happens. But later always comes, and when it does, the timeline is shot, the budget is blown, and the clients feel lied to. Professional builders do not say yes to everything. They ask questions, they push back when they need to, they are upfront about what is realistic. That kind of honesty prevents a lot of grief. Number 3 is clients who shop on price alone. Now, this one is a bit touchy, but it does need to be said. Cheaper is not always cheaper, not when you look at the whole picture. If price is the first and only filter, there's a good chance the builder who gets the job is the one who left out the most things. It is easy to underbid. It is much harder to deliver. Clients need to ask better questions. What is your process? How do you handle changes? How does the schedule and timeline work? What does your warranty look like? Once that is clear, then talk price, because at that point you are comparing real numbers instead of just wishful thinking. Number 4 is undefined roles and responsibilities. This is another common breakdown. Nobody knows who is doing what. Who is the designer? Who chooses the finishes? Who deals with permits? Who coordinates the trades? When those things are not defined up front, they get dropped or fought over later. The builder expects the client to pick tile. The client expects the builder to schedule a site inspection. Both sides wait, and nothing happens. Professional projects are built on clearly defined roles. Everyone knows what they are responsible for, and just as importantly, what they are not. That kind of structure saves time, money, and headaches. In a turnkey model, this confusion is eliminated. The builder takes responsibility for the entire process, from design to permits to construction and final handover. Clients are involved in selecting finishes and making design decisions, but all the coordination, scheduling, and execution is managed by one team. Nothing slips through the cracks because nothing is left up for debate. Number 5 is when trust breaks down. At the core of all of this is trust. Construction is stressful. Timelines shift, weather causes delays, materials get backordered. When there is trust, people can roll with it. They can understand and stay calm. But when trust breaks down, everything gets tense. Clients start withholding payments, builders stop taking calls, and communication breaks down. It becomes a fight instead of a partnership. Trust does not come from being perfect. It comes from being consistent, from owning mistakes and communicating clearly. When trust is strong, the projects can survive setbacks. When it is not, even a small issue can derail the whole thing. So why do people get burned in construction? Most of the time, it's not because of some giant disaster. It is because of little things that have added up. A quote that wasn't clear, a builder who overpromised, a client who cared only about price, roles that were not defined, or trust that got damaged along the way. The good news is all of these things are fixable. Start with clarity, build with honesty, communicate early, define expectations, and work with people who you know are going to do what they say they're going to do, and they care about it. Do that, and the horror story never happens. As a home builder for the past 20 years, certainly we have had our fair share of miscommunications or mistakes or breakdowns or things that have not gone according to plan and not gone perfectly. But what I can tell you with absolute certainty is that in almost all, if not all of the cases that we run into a problem, it very likely comes down to some form of miscommunication or lack of communication or lack of understanding between either the builder and the tradespeople, or the builder and the client, or the client and the tradespeople, or the client and the realtor, or the realtor and the builder. It normally comes down to some form of miscommunication or lack of communication. Sometimes things on a job site happen. Mistakes happen. People make mistakes. Things get broken. Things get damaged. Things get back ordered. Something gets labeled wrong. Something gets built wrong. All of those things normally are pretty straightforward to fix. And in many cases, some of those things they could be relatively big ticket items that could perhaps cost money and require that somebody redo some work that they already did, or fix something that they built, or redo something that was done incorrectly. But in almost all of those cases, those problems are pretty easy. The problems that arise from simply something being done incorrectly on site, not exactly according to the plan, or something gets damaged, or a minor detail gets overlooked. If these things are caught in time, they can be addressed. The bigger problems, and the problems that cause more hardship and more tense moments and are less likely to be resolved easily, are the issues that surround communication or lack thereof. We do see this from time to time. And in my experience, in my 20 years as a home builder, this normally is avoidable. It's normally avoidable if everyone was the clear understanding as to what they were buying, what was included, how the process was going to work. The more moving parts that you have, the more people you have involved in the process, perhaps the less likely it is that things will happen exactly the way you envision them. If you're in a scenario where you talk only and exclusively to one person who either is or represents the builder or the contractor that you're going to deal with, then there's a pretty good chance that you're going to eliminate a lot of that confusion, because you're dealing with the source and they're dealing with the source. You're talking directly to the builder is speaking directly to you. You're working things out and you're making sure everybody's on the same page. And that's generally how we function here at Stonewater Homes. I've been a custom home builder for 20 years, and part of our process is to meet with our clients and discuss their wants and needs and make sure that we capture that correctly and they're illustrated properly in the plan. And then all of these details and specifications are then captured on the building specifications within the contract and itemized and identified within our written contract and paperwork. And unfortunately, it's happened a number of times over the years, but sometimes people just don't read the contract. Sometimes they don't read or review the paperwork. Our written agreements and contracts are written in plain English, and I wrote them myself. I'm not a lawyer. Of course, the lawyers have reviewed them. My contracts have been used hundreds of times. My contracts have even been used by other companies, other builders. I've seen some of my schedules recirculating around from other builders with their logo at the top. And that's fine. I actually think the world would be a better place if everyone was very clear about what they were doing and what was included and what wasn't included. I think it's a good idea for everyone to be on the same page when they're entering into a contract or an agreement with someone. But this paperwork, unfortunately, sometimes it gets signed, but it doesn't get read. And sometimes it gets read, but it's not understood, perhaps, or it's glazed over. If you're not familiar with the custom home design process, one thing I can tell you is that it takes time and it doesn't happen overnight. So folks don't come in and start the process and 2 days later a plan is drawn and we've covered everything in one meeting and we're moving on. Normally the process is going to involve meeting in person several times, having several phone conversations, lots of email exchange, lots of back and forth to fine tune things to make sure that everything is exactly the way these customers would like it to be. It's not uncommon for that process to take many weeks, if not months. So imagine if you start having a conversation with a builder in October or November, you get the ball rolling, you're talking about things throughout the winter months, you're drawing plans and bouncing ideas back and forth, trying to nail down the specifications, get all the details, price everything so that your home is priced exactly the way you want it. Well, over those many weeks or months, there certainly will be conversations and things that you will discuss, and maybe you want to do, and then you decide you don't want to do it. Maybe they were priced to be included, then you decided to exclude them, or you threw out an idea and perhaps the builder did or did not incorporate that into the plan and into the specifications because you weren't clear enough about the fact that you wanted it included. If everyone is honest and forthcoming with the information, and the builder takes time to make sure that the schedules and details and contracts are written correctly, and that the plans are drawn correctly and illustrate what the homeowners want, and if the homeowners also themselves take time to review the plans very closely, to review the contract and specifications very closely, and make a list of any questions that you have or anything that requires further explanation. If those things happen, then it is going to drastically reduce the chance of any kind of miscommunication or confusion later in the process. But all too often, unfortunately, sometimes you get builders who regurgitate the same paperwork and they don't necessarily review it properly, so it could have some mistakes or errors because it was copied over from a previous contract. But more often than not, what we see in our world, if there is any confusion or debate with respect to what's in the contract, what's not in the contract, what's included, how things should happen, you said this, we said that, in most of those circumstances, unfortunately, what we find is the clients didn't read the contract. And at the very top of our contract, at the very first paragraph at the top of the contract, when we get to that point, is a very clearly written disclaimer that states the following written details are the details that we will refer to from now on. All previous correspondence, whether it be written, verbal, or otherwise, does not apply. And you have to do that from a builder's perspective, and you have to do that from your own perspective as a client. If you imagine having a conversation with a builder over the course of several weeks or months, you talk about a lot of different things. I've had conversations in homes that we've designed with folks. The list is endless here. It could be, we talked about in-floor heat, but they decided not to go with in-floor heat. We talked about quartz countertops in all of the vanities instead of just the kitchen, but they decided to go with laminate in the laundry room and the basement bathroom. So these finite details get thrown around and get nailed down over time. And so what you need to do as the client is you just need to make sure that what you're expecting to be included is all clearly identified in the plans and contract and schedules that are attached to the contract. And if you have any questions about that, make sure to ask your builder for clarity. Make sure they, even if they have to explicitly write something into the contract so that there is no confusion. I've done that before. I've had folks in the past that, perhaps didn't see something itemized or referred to the way we spoke about it. That's no big deal. We just take the contract, we go to that section, we either add another clause, another line, another sentence for that matter, that just further clarifies and confirms what is expected in the deal. The home building process from start to finish in our world takes roughly about a year. Now, not all of that is construction time frame. Some of that is going through this process. Some of that is permitting. The process from the time we first make contact with a potential client until the time they move in, that is always more than a year. And sometimes that could be several years, depending on when the person first makes contact and when we actually get started on the construction of the home. And building a home, even as a turnkey builder who provides everything, it takes care of everything from top to bottom, from start to finish. Building a home can be a very stressful time for homeowners and for clients. Not because you're doing the work of building the home, but moving is stressful. Building a new home adds another element because there are things that you need to do. You need to make some selections. You need to choose your finishes and your colors and your flooring and your cabinets and those types of things. And so there is a thought process involved, and you have to pay some attention to it, and you're busy with your own life and you have work and you have children, you have all these things on the go. So what happens is you are now required to do something that you don't have a tremendous amount of familiarity with, and that can cause a bit of anxiety. But if you hire a builder who is very familiar with it, then really all you have to do is familiarize yourself with that builder's process. You don't have to understand everything about construction. You don't have to understand how everything happens and how all of these things work. You just have to understand how the process works with the builder who you have decided to build with. And that starts by making sure that you read and understand the contracts and the documentation that you are signing. And if you have any questions on that, make sure you converse with your home builder so that they can explain it with you. The takeaway from today's episode is that we all hear lots of horror stories about projects gone wrong. We all hear these disastrous contractor horror stories. And you know what? They're out there. I've seen it. I've seen it in real life. Truthfully, I've never in my 20 years ever had a really horrible experience with any client from the perspective of things not being done correctly or not happening correctly. We've never had that. I've certainly had my share of difficult clients, and they may also think that we were difficult to deal with. It's entirely possible. But if I look at all of the homes we've ever built, if I think about all of the contracts we've had and all of the clients that we've dealt with over the years, hundreds of them. Out of those hundreds of clients, hundreds of homes, dozens of communities, I could probably count on one hand how many of those projects I would consider them to be unsuccessful building relationships. That doesn't mean the house wasn't successful. That doesn't mean that the house wasn't built according to the plans. That doesn't mean that the project wasn't delivered to the clients exactly as per the contract. Everything that we agreed was going to be included. It was going to be finished on time and so on. That doesn't mean that any of that didn't happen. I just mean that sometimes there is a breakdown in communication. It could go either way. It could be the builder's responsibility. It could be the homeowner's responsibility. It could be a little bit of both. But if you're dealing with reasonable, logical people and they're fair to deal with, then all of these things can easily be overcome and worked through. But sometimes, unfortunately, you're not dealing with logical, reasonable, rational people who are being fair. Sometimes you deal with folks who aren't being fair. I've had, unfortunately, over the years, I've had circumstances where I've dealt with clients who have been very clearly dishonest with us. I mean, straight up lying, caught in lies. And some of those circumstances have been awkward because you don't want to even address the fact that you know that the person you're talking to is lying to you. And I can understand it going the other way as well. If you were dealing with a contractor or a builder and you knew that that builder was not telling you the truth, if you knew that they were being dishonest or deceitful in any way, then you're going to have a hard time continuing that relationship. For me personally, I can, throughout the process of working with clients, up to the point where we put the contract together, from the time we first meet and we start having a conversation and we start talking about what we're going to build and how we're going to build it, and we're pricing things, and we're starting to begin the relationship of working together. Before we get to the point of signing the contract, I will have already decided if this is a client that we want to do business with. I need to also make sure that I'm doing business with clients who I think are going to be fair and reasonable people and are going to treat my staff with respect, and they have reasonable expectations. Just as you as a client, you as a potential homeowner, you want to make sure that you find yourself a builder or contractor who you believe is going to be fair and truthful with you and honest. And that doesn't mean that everything you ask them is going to be a yes. Certainly doesn't mean that they are going to be the cheapest. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to love every answer they give you. But the main thing you need to make sure of is that the answers that you're being provided are truthful and that they are being forthcoming with the information so that you feel like no matter what you ask, even if you don't like the answer, you're getting a truthful response. And we as home builders, we want the same thing. And this is a topic that I'll bring up when I discuss home building and pricing, how we price homes. But as an example to illustrate this, when I have a conversation with somebody for the very first time, one of the things I will ask them early on in that conversation is for them to give me an idea of the budget that they are working with, because it helps me answer their questions like which communities they would be a good fit for, or what type or size or style or location of home we can discuss with them that is going to meet their budget. We build homes for folks today that range anywhere from, say, $500,000 to well over $2 million. In my 20 years as a home builder, I have yet to meet anyone, even folks that we've built for, who have built homes that have been $1.5 million, $2 million and more. They still have a budget. We've built homes for folks and the home is $2 million, but that doesn't mean that when we sat down and I asked them what kind of budget are we working with, they didn't say, oh, it doesn't matter, just we'll pay anything. There is no budget. They probably said something like, we'd like to kind of keep it in or around or under $2 million. Okay, great. That's a good place to start. That's a very wide range. $2 million you can do a lot with. But if these folks were already talking about building in a community where the average home is between $1.5 and $2 million, then what that tells us is we're probably aiming towards something that would be toward the high end of the community that they're going to build in. And therefore, the comparables for them would be the other homes in that community that are close to $2 million. If somebody told me that their budget was $700,000, then I'm not going to direct them toward a community where we build $1.2 to $1.5 million homes, because we can't do what they want there. So if $700,000 is the budget, I want to take them to a community where we build homes between $600,000 and $800,000. And so for me, that first question, which often takes place in the first conversation, could be the first meeting, that question of asking the client or potential client what their budget is also, it's a bit of a trust fall for me too, because I know that folks can be a little reluctant to share their budget. You really can't have a meaningful conversation with a home builder if they have no idea what kind of budget you are working with, because that means they have no idea what kind of budget they are working with. And the first thing that I need to know when we're going to start talking about building a home and what we can provide for you is, what kind of price range are we talking about? That's the purpose of this conversation today, was to kind of lay out a bit of some of the potential issues that cause problems throughout the building contractor, home builder, client relationship as it unfolds over the several or many months or even year or more that you have this working relationship with the home builder or contractor that you're dealing with. And much of the problems that can arise can be dealt with and avoided if things are done correctly early on at the planning stages and at the contract stage, and everyone makes sure that they are very well versed in what's included, what's not included, who's doing what, how long it's going to take, and so on. I appreciate you listening today, folks. Thanks very much. If you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.